Welcome to Brain Wellness, the podcast. I'm your host, Mandy NP. What started as all things related to brain health and wellness has morphed into largely brain injury health and wellness, with occasional other neurological topics. My mission remains the same, to help you on the path to a healthier brain. So, without further ado, let's get into the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Brain Wellness, the podcast. My guest today is Wendy Lurrie. Wendy is a former Chief Marketing Officer, Growth and Strategy Executive, and creator of Rupture, the World of Best Guessistan, a platform exploring what happens when systems fail, especially the human ones we rely on most. After a traumatic brain injury disrupted her ability to function in the way she once could, Wendy began documenting the invisible structural changes that follow rupture, shifts in cognition, perception, identity, and control. Her work draws from both lived experience and decades spent leading organizations, building brands, and navigating complex systems under pressure. She focuses on the gap between what looks normal from the outside and what no longer works underneath, particularly the failure of language, systems, and culture to accurately describe life after disruption. She's also the author of Panic with Credentials, How Systems Survive by Making Failure Personal, which launched as the #1 new release in organizational design on Amazon. And I'm so excited to have you here today, Wendy, so we can share some thoughts on our recoveries here. So thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah. So before we hit record, I asked you a question that I needed to bring back on the show because I loved your answer on it. Where did you come up with the idea of the best guessistan?
Okay. So it was an accident. Like every great idea I've ever had, I stumbled into it. Like every great strategy I've ever had, I backed into. And I had started writing a blog about a year after my head injury just to try and make sense of it. And it was really just for me, just to try to see, like, I don't understand what's going on inside my head. And, and the writing changed and it evolved and I was doing it for a while. And by the way, it was the only therapy that ever helped me. That ever helped me get out of the sort of the dark place that I was in year two. And I was writing about the treatments and all the treatments I'd been through. And I'm sure we can have a conversation about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you know what? At a certain point, nobody knows what to do anymore. Everyone is just taking their best guess. Welcome to Best Guessistan.
Mm-hmm.
And that little throwaway line was really the origin of this. And then I sat with it for a few days and I was like, that's interesting. It's interesting to sort of think about a place for people like us who don't heal on schedule, whose recoveries cannot be just, it's like who cannot survive like sort of toxic positivity. And so I decided to see if I could build it out a little more. So, a lot of people aren't familiar with this, but the New York Times travel section has this feature called like 36 hours, where they'll take like one city or one place. And if you have like 36 hours, like here are all the places you should see and when. So I was like, that would be interesting. Why don't I do a 36 hours in Best Guessistan, which actually forced me to create more than just the idea of a country, but how does it work? And is there infrastructure? And is there transportation? And what is the government like? And so little by little, I just started building out this world. And it basically was because the world as it exists today just doesn't accommodate people like us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what if there were a place where it was okay not to be okay, where no one expected you to do things on schedule? And it isn't a utopia by any means. Like every mug is chipped, every painting is awry. It's like it's far from perfect, but it's a place where you don't have to negotiate accommodations. They're anticipated. And you don't have to rise to meet the place rises to meet you. Mm-hmm. So that was where it came from. And I've been writing about it and publishing about it and I create new ministries. The government structure is based on a series of ministries. I have ministries for everything.
That's
I
right.
do.
Yeah.
I have ministries of disclosure. I have ministries of accommodation, which is kind of like the OR ministry. I have ministries of let's solve the problem in a different way. And it just it became a way for me to think through sort of all of the different challenges and issues and problems that a brain injury causes. And every time there's a new one, I create a ministry because it's the ministry's role to deal with that issue. And in terms of people have asked me, like, where did the ministry idea come from? I was recovering from rotator cuff surgery last year, and it was a long recovery because it's a horrible surgery. And so I was just laid up and I had nothing to do. And I started watching historical Korean dramas and I fell in love with them. And they have a ministry system. I mean, the ministers are more important in some than in others, but I really liked the idea of ministries, not like departments, but like organizational units that had autonomy and the ability to work on their own as well as work with other ministries. Yeah. So a lot of my old organizational knowledge and perspective has come into play.
Yeah. I love that. Well, I was thinking of like the ministries of health, so I was just in Switzerland for the World Health Assembly, and the ministries of health are all there for that. So that's kind of what I was thinking when you mentioned that as well.
Yeah,
We have
mine
a
are a
lot
little
of
more bizarre, but yeah.
yeah, no, it's okay. We have a lot of overlap because I just had a rotator cuff surgery last year. So
Did you? Then you know.
yeah, that's probably a whole nother episode in
Yes,
itself. So let's go back for a second because my
okay.
first question to people is usually tell us a little bit about your backstory. So what do you want to share about how you got to where you are now and why you started blogging about an injury?
So first, I guess I should say how I got the injury, right? Because every injury has a different origin story. So
Mhm.
mine was caused by an Uber driver, and it wasn't a car accident. I had just started a new job. I was 2.5 weeks into a new job as the chief marketing officer of a European tech company. And my daughter was getting married. And so I went to Boston for the wedding. I went from Boston to Paris to meet with with the French side of the house. Came back to New York. I think it was on a Friday. And on that Sunday, I had a guitar lesson. I'm a classical guitar student, emphasis on student. And I took an Uber there just because driving around. And we just moved from New York City to northern Vermont. So parking is a different kind of thing here, but it's difficult there. So I took an Uber. And when we got to the place, I got out of the car, driver hit the button for the hatchback to come up. I reached in to get my guitar, and he didn't look to see if I was out of the way when he pushed the button for the hatch to come down. And it went boom, boom. Like I just always describe this as like skipping stones in hell. That's what it felt like. And I was really dazed. I think he asked me if I was okay. I think I said yes. I definitely remember I gave him a 5-star review and a tip because again, like muscle memory. And then I like sort of wiped off my head and I was bleeding. So I just like wiped, I found a tissue, wiped it off, went up, had a guitar lesson, no memory of that lesson at all. Came home and said to my husband, I think I need some first aid, just got a few cuts. And I figured I was fine. And then the next day the headache started. So
Mhm.
that was sort of that's the genesis of all of this was that
Yeah.
particular thing. And I tried to keep working. I tried to keep doing what I was doing and to live my life as though that hadn't happened. And it took me a while to realize that was impossible.
Mhm.
That was absolutely impossible, but it took me quite a while to get there.
Mhm.
And so everyone copes with this in their own way. I've done a lot of rehab. I've worked on a lot of the deficits and, I've come to realize sort of like what my symptoms are, what I have to live with. And for me, it's the daily pain, which comes pretty much at the same time every day. And didn't really deal with cognition problems or speech and language. For me, it was much more about my emotions and
Mhm.
how my emotions, I am triggered now. I've always kept my emotions so far away you wouldn't even, I've been called the ice queen, the ice princess, and I wore that with pride. And now everything sets me off
Yeah.
and I react emotionally to everything. So that's sort of how I got here and how I've been just figuring out who I am and what life post rupture is like.
Yeah. Yeah. So you use this term rupture. What exactly does that mean?
So I'm a language person. My husband calls me the word lady. So even if I've lost some of my vocabulary, I still have a lot of it. And I was looking for a word that would describe this state or this event that causes you to break your life into before and after.
Mhm.
And I workshopped a lot of words and there was
Mhm.
challenge and crisis. And all of those sounded recoverable. I
Mhm.
needed something that sounded that the way it felt. That was almost onomatopoetic, right? And the idea of rupture is it doesn't split down the middle nice and neat, right? Things are wrenched apart. So, and that was absolutely what the brain injury did to me. I mean, my life before is non-recoverable. I will never be that person again. I'm trying to figure out and I'm still trying to figure out what does life in the after look like? And then I realized a lot of people live here, right? I started doing the math on concussions, right? We have about 3.8 million new concussions a year. 10 to 30% of of the people with those do not recover in 10 to 14 days. And when you add it up year after, year and year and year, it's a ton of people. I refer to us usually as like the 10 to 30%. There's nothing for us.
Mhm.
There's no, there are, you run out of treatments. You do as much rehab as you can. And then you're just left. And it was like, who speaks for us and other people who are living with, whether it's an invisible disability, chronic illness, things that you just don't recover from in a society that expects you to recover on schedule.
Yeah. 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 Because all of the textbooks tell us that most people get better in 3 to 4 weeks.
Yep.
And that's kind of what we've always thought
Yeah.
in medical practice. And the numbers that I've seen are actually a little bit higher than what you had.
Tell me.
Went to the National TBI Day last year in DC, and we learned that it's more like 30 to 50% of people continue to
Oh,
have
yeah.
symptoms well beyond a year. And there were several references that have this documented. So it's pretty well documented now in the last couple of
Now.
years that we know that there are so many people that still continue to have symptoms. But no two
No,
concussions look the same. No two
no.
TBIs look the same, and concussion is a TBI. And a lot of people don't understand that part either.
I know. I know there's a lot of
Mhm.
confusion.
Mhm.
And actually the first thing you said is really important too, the fact that, like, no 2 people have the same one.
Yeah.
I created a ministry called Same Code, Different Reality.
Ah,
I did because I talk to people with TBIs as you do
yeah.
also, and I realize everyone is having a completely different experience, but because of the billing code, and the code is meant as an insurance code, it's not meant to be a diagnostic code.
Mhm.
We are all lumped under the same code, which sort of creates a protocol. We all have to follow the same protocol, even with different symptoms, different experiences, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done there to help people understand, like, you and I can have completely different sets of symptoms, but we both have TBIs. We both have
Yes.
concussions,
Yeah.
right? And the language is inadequate. I have a lot to say, and we can talk about it as much as you want. I just find the language around this completely inadequate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, so up until well, still currently, actually, we still use the terms mild, moderate, and severe TBI. And I always tell patients I hate those terms
Mhm,
because it really only tells you what happened the moment the injury occurred. It does not tell you anything about the long-term effects from
mhm.
it. So, yeah, terminology is not
No,
not accurate whatsoever.
no.
Yeah. So, kind of getting back to that thought, when we think about the fact that not everybody gets better, and even the term mild TBI, which is a concussion, the it's not mild by any means.
Right.
Even though we know now that 10 to 30 or 30 to 50, whatever research you want to look at on it, that those many people still have all of those symptoms. Why do you think that it gets ignored from your perspective and your research you've done?
Well, I think our healthcare system is based on interventions, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's how people make money in our healthcare system by doing more, right? We don't have a let's sit back and watch kind of attitude toward medicine.
Mm,
And I think it's really hard for providers to deal with us
mhm.
because they want to do things. They want to help. And at a certain point, nothing's working anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I did, I have a lot of background in pharma and life sciences. So when I first had this injury, I just thought, well, there must be tons of treatments available. There must be tons of drugs, right? Because look who gets these football players, people in the military, people that we as a society say that we care about. So I was like, there must be things. And then I went and I looked at all the pharma pipelines and there was nothing. There was nothing. And that was shocking. I mean, my mother still says to me, my mother and I talk about this all the time. Are you sure there's nothing else? And I like once a year, I will go back and look at the pipelines again. I found a little bit more, but I think this problem is so difficult for researchers to solve. I mean, in a lot of cases, I think this is almost an intractable problem. Like, where do you start? So one of the things that I've done, besides Best Guessistan, my project has a lot of like little like nooks and crannies. I started doing. I want to get back to the language thing, right?
Yeah.
Because it's also the mild, moderate, severe is one very good example of where language is inadequate. Another one is in how symptoms are described. Brain fog? Nobody knows what brain fog is. Cognitive fatigue? I mean, they're words that people use. It also reminds me like how people describe themselves as having a mild to moderate something, which just tells you that pharma advertising is very effective because that's how we humans speak. That's how pharma companies speak, right? But as I started thinking about how the language that we have available kind of flattens everything, I decided to start documenting very specific changes. And I started this series called Brain Changes Small and Large and looking at specific things like how my brain worked before and how my brain works now. Whether that I did, I did that, and it helps people locate themselves. But I was also thinking a little arrogantly, like, what if this could actually help clinical research
Yeah.
and give people more of a map? And some of the things are really small, like I can no longer handle group texts. They used to be something I really enjoyed. Cannot handle them anymore. It could be that small, or it could go to something really large. And one example of that is all of my emotions have a half-life now. I've never been an angry person. I have felt rage so few times in my life I could count them on hands on the fingers of one hand. But now, if I hear something that I am not prepared for or don't really want to hear, I am filled with like white hot rage. And I've learned the hard way that I have to wait because if I act in that, so that rage is 24 hours. I've also learned that enthusiasm has a 3-day half-life. And so when I'm hit with an idea that sounds good, I'm cloud nine. I'm walking around. I'm super excited. I want to do everything. And then I have to wait for the enthusiasm to cool, 3-day process, and then I can interrogate the idea.
Mhm.
But I'm really learning so I have like the small changes and the large changes are just really useful ways for me to document. Like we have to get it's too vague. The more specific we can get, I think the more we can help people. And one of the ways I test that is I'm very active in the TBI subreddit. It was
Mm.
one of the places I went in the beginning because, Reddit is where you go when you don't know where else to go. And I post these things and I'm like, "Has anyone else had this?" And I get these incredible, like, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of responses. I did one about, how I can no longer read books for pleasure. And I was an English major, did my master's in English like this, got married in a library, and someone responded and said, I've had that too, but never connected it to the TBI," which was really interesting. And there was another one, I think out loud now. I talk to myself. I never did that before. I thought people who did that were nuts, and now I'm one of them. And I posted that one, and someone responded to me and said, "I've had my TBI for 50 years, and I never realized until I read what you wrote that I've been doing this ever since."
Yeah.
So it's helping people, like, connect the dots and also just finding someone who understands, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
the hardest. This thing is so unrelatable.
Yeah. Yeah. I talk to patients all the time about I'll ask questions that seem very strange. And when I go through a review of systems, for example, so when we have a patient come in, we're supposed to go through the systems and ask
Mhm.
about different questions. So if you've gone into a doctor, they'll ask you, "Are you having chest pains, shortness of breath, blah, 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 all the things." Well, I can't just stop at brain type of questions because your brain touches every single cell in your
Exactly.
body. So I'm asking all of these questions, and all of a sudden people are having those aha moments. They're like,
Mhm.
"I never even thought about that. Yeah, I've had that, but I didn't think about when it started.
Mhm.
And do you really think that's related to my brain injury?" I'm like, "Did you have it before?"
Right.
No. Well, then probably.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and people don't connect, and I think the other
Mm-mm.
thing that I've found that I've experienced myself, but I've also heard from other people, is that the concussion, the mild TBI, can cause other what seems like unrelated physical problems. I spoke to
Mm-hmm.
someone who said, that she developed all these GI problems
Mm-hmm.
that she'd never had before. I developed within 30 days of the head injury, I developed the one of the, if not the rarest forms of an autoimmune disease. It is so rare that the average rheumatologist sees no cases of this,
Mm-hmm.
not one. And there's no way that these things are not connected, right? And I talked to my neurologist about it. I talked to my rheumatologist about it, and said we can't actually prove causality, but
Mm-hmm.
they said any assault on your body, the first system to respond is the immune system.
Mm-hmm.
They said it's very likely that the injury caused the autoimmune disease. I mean, it's exactly to your point. The brain
Mm-hmm.
affects everything. It isn't it's not in a silo,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
so everything that we experience, every system in our bodies is affected by this, and people don't know that. They don't know that it can cause other things or that those things are related. It's
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot we don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other things that I talk about a lot is brain injuries in kids because
Mm,
we always talk about how they're made of rubber. They fall down, they get back up, and they're just fine, right? Well, then they develop issues with learning and behavior, and we don't put two and two together to connect those things either. So
right.
people will have injuries 50 years ago and not realize it because nobody really talked about it at that point.
Mhm.
And now they have all these symptoms that they don't know why they're having these symptoms. And again, when did they start? What
Right.
happened right before that?
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, my OT talks about she talks about the large percentage of people who go undiagnosed,
Hmm.
because they think, "I didn't hit it that hard. I mean, it
Yeah.
wasn't really a thing I have to worry about." And she said, then they develop symptoms.
Yeah.
And she said one really good example, she said blood pressure. She said a lot of people don't know that a brain injury impacts blood pressure and it makes it more
Hmm.
labile. She said, so someone will be not feeling well, and they'll go to their provider who'll check their blood pressure and see that it's very high and treat them for that without ever
Yeah.
knowing or looking for anything underlying. This is hard and complicated. It's hard and complicated to live with, but it's
Hmm.
also hard and complicated for other people around us to live with,
Hmm.
and for the clinicians to figure out what to do with. It's
Hmm.
just really, really hard.
Hmm. Yeah. Having been a nurse practitioner before my injury, I did everything that school taught me. I thought
Mhm.
I knew a lot about brain injury until I had my own. And being a patient taught me more than any of my schooling ever
I
did.
believe it.
And it shaped my profession. It shaped what I do. And patients come in and they feel heard
Mhm,
because I've been there.
mhm.
And I wish that there's a way that I could get all of my colleagues to understand it without actually having to have a brain injury themselves. Without lining them up and smacking them all on the head. But
But it is hard for anyone else to understand. So
yeah,
if you don't mind my asking, what was the biggest change in sort of your practice after you had the head injury versus before?
yeah. So prior to my injury, I was in the hospital. I was a neurohospitalist, NP. Did mostly stroke, but a little bit of everything. So I saw patients that had TBI, new onset of Parkinson's or
Mm,
whatever. So we did consults and diagnosed things and treated stroke, all of those typical things. I tried going back to the hospital afterwards, and it was too overwhelming, too loud, too busy, too bright, too everything. So I am 100% clinic now
Mm,
because it's controlled environment. I can control my room. I can close the blinds if I need to. I can open them up to get natural light if I need to. And I can close the door,
yeah.
and I don't have everybody talking out in the hallway that sounds like they're right next to me. So that was the biggest shift in that part of my practice, but also I did a different kind of brain injury. I did the acquired brain injury from strokes prior. That was
Mhm.
my main area of focus.
Interesting.
And now it's the traumatic side of things and the other acquired injuries, anoxic events, people that have
Interesting.
had surgery
Yeah.
that wake up and they look like they've had a brain injury.
Interesting. Well, by the way, to your point about the lights and everything at the hospital,
Mhm.
every single light in Beskistan, every single one, is on a dimmer switch.
Yeah, I love
They
it.
have to be. Everyone in the world should be, but, I mean, when I go see the doctors, the first thing I say to them is, "Can we please turn off the lights?"
Yeah,
And I don't know about you, my auditory sensitivity has gotten worse. My visual sensitivity, I think, has gotten better because I could not have done this a few
yeah.
years ago, but the sound problem has gotten much
Mm,
worse.
mhm.
But, yeah, so
Yeah,
I
I developed something called auditory processing disorder.
Mhm.
All the sounds were too loud, and I had a pretty good hearing prior to my injury, and then it was just heightened. Everything was loud, everything was way too loud, and in loud environments, if we would try to go out to dinner, I couldn't understand my husband or my kids, I couldn't understand the wait staff trying to ask us questions, and I now wear hearing aids for that, and it's amazing. It shuts down
Has it
some of that
helped?
excess. Oh my gosh, it was a world changer.
Okay, I
I
need to yeah.
yeah, I didn't wanna like it
No, of course not.
because
Of course not.
I had eye surgeries prior to my injury as well, and now I'm back in glasses, so I had glasses and hearing aids and you name it, and I've got all these things on my ears, and I didn't wanna like them, but it made such a world of difference that I could enjoy going to my middle child
Yes.
was in theater, I could enjoy going to his theater performances. I could go to the band and choir concerts for my kids. I can
Mhm.
turn them down also. So
Right.
if it's too
Right.
loud, I can dim it a little bit more myself, so it's amazing
That's
that I can enjoy those things again.
that's so interesting. I'm gonna look into that. I mean, one of the things so one thing that I have found is that I need audio all of the time. I
Yeah,
always liked audio, but now I can't have silence because there's too much noise. My irritated brain,
yeah,
it quiets it down, but I have to be really careful. I've been music has, like, been at the center of my life
yeah.
forever, but there are kinds of music I can no longer listen to.
Mhm,
Heavy beats, a lot of horns, electronica, I just I can't. I'm gonna look into the hearing aids, though,
mhm.
because I have the same problem. I mean, I have trouble hearing when there's other noise going on, and it also
Yep.
just that's if someone was asking last night, actually, we had a lot of people here at the house, and more than I'm used to, and at a certain point, there was just too much noise and too many voices, and I felt it in my body. Like, my brain felt irritated, but my body felt like my skin didn't fit, e everything
Mhm.
like, I was just having this massive allergic reaction,
Yeah,
and I had to walk out and just go for a walk.
yeah.
'Cause I would say I'm still learning what my
Mhm,
brain can tolerate and what it can't.
mhm,
You know, and
mhm.
you think, like, 4 years in, like, you would have it figured out, but you don't. I mean, and the symptoms change too.
They do, they do. I call it, like, peeling back the layers of the onion. Once you've
Yes.
kinda dealt with the main things, other things come up. So, for note on that auditory processing thing,
Yeah.
I had an episode, I interviewed Dr. Heidi Hill
Mhm.
quite some time ago now, but if you wanna go back and look and listen
I
to
will.
that one, she talked about the whole auditory processing piece and how to diagnose it. There's 5 people in the United States, when I last talked to her, that do this functional testing of hearing for auditory processing disorder. So check and see if there's might
I
be
will.
one in your area, because that would be the best thing to do for that one.
Well, also my dad, who he passed away in 2021, he was an audiologist and a speech pathologist,
Yeah.
and he taught audiology and speech path at NYU for 50 years.
Wow.
I wish he were here right now because
I
I could talk
know.
to him about the hearing thing and
Yeah.
hearing aids, but I still have his people in his network.
Yeah.
I can find out if there's anyone who can do that
Awesome.
because I didn't wear glasses before this.
Yeah.
I didn't have problems with my hearing before this, but I do now. So
Yeah.
and I'm fine with hearing aids. If they help, there's
They were
I don't
game
have any
changer.
issues with stigma. I don't once you live with this, like, it's easy to put that aside
That's so true. So true. What were some of the biggest things that you needed in your recovery?
that I needed. Well, for one thing, I would say I'm not recovered. I'm in some phase of recovery,
Yeah.
I guess, because things have sort of plateaued. I needed a lot of grace.
Mhm.
That's really what I needed. I needed people to part of the problem I've had, and I know a lot of people go through this, I don't sound like I have a head injury. I don't look like I had a head injury, and I needed people to understand that even though I seem fine, I'm
Mhm.
not fine. But I
Mhm.
also didn't want to be sort of treated as a patient. And finding that balance was really tricky. And what I did in the beginning was I did cut everybody off because being with people, like having people over, like and sitting on the couch next to me was I didn't know how to do that.
Mhm.
And they were like, "Can we text you?" I'm like, "I can't handle texts." Or I'm like, or emails. And they were like, can you get on a video call?" I'm like, "Definitely can't do that." So I cut myself off from everybody and then felt isolated, even though
Mhm.
I self-isolated. And I just needed people to give me the time to figure out when I could reengage. And they did. Everybody was great. It was hard for me. I mean, I have always been a warrior. I
Mhm.
have always worked through everything. Like I've never let anything, any kind of injury or illness get in my way. I worked through everything. And not being able to muscle through this change it. Not only was it hard, it affects how you see yourself, right? Because if you see
Yeah.
yourself as that warrior and all of a sudden you can't, who are you? Like,
Mhm.
I mean, for me, a big part of this and affected people around me too is who am I if I don't have those qualities that I had before? If I
Mhm.
can't perform on demand, right?
Mhm.
I have to do so much prep now for everything. I have to like think through. I have to do scenario planning. I have to figure everything out. And what I need other people around me to understand is I'm still the same person, but I have to figure things out in a different way. And
Mhm.
it's going to seem weird. It's
Mhm.
just going to seem weird.
Mhm.
But I will say I've had a great support system. My husband, my kids, my friends, doing my podcast, I've met so many people with TBIs, which has been great. So the relatability, what you were talking about with you wish
Mhm.
everyone short of having to like hit them in the head with a racket. A very good friend of mine said to me when we were talking about this, she said, "Well, why is this different from when you had breast cancer? What makes this different?" So in 2018, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I'm fine. And I said, "Here's the difference." I said, "Breast cancer is relatable." I said, "Even if people haven't gone through it, they know tons of people who are, and everyone knows the language." So people would say to me, "Well, are you having, chemotherapy or immunotherapy? Are you using the Canadian protocol for the radiation?" Everyone knew everything at what stage, what phase. You tell people you have a brain injury, no one even knows what questions to ask.
Mhm.
They don't have access to this because it
Mhm.
is so remote. So I found the unrelatability of this challenging kind of socially. And
Mhm.
then I kept trying to work. That was the other thing was I kept trying to do I felt bad. Like I was hired by this company. They believed in me, but the person they hired was no longer the person who was coming into the office every day.
Yeah.
I couldn't perform in the same way. And they were great and they offered me all kinds of accommodations. And I said no to every single one because every one of I felt like if I accepted an accommodation, it meant I was
Mhm.
weak. And now everybody would look at me as less than. So I'm going to try to muscle through, which just made everything worse. And then when we all had to say goodbye to each other because clearly this was not going to work out, I never blamed the company. I was like, said, What you have now is not what you bought. That's fair." So it's just I think anything we can do to help people around us understand, give them language, give them
Mhm.
specifics, help. I was talking to my husband about this a few weeks ago because he got frustrated with me because I reacted to something very emotionally, and I said, no one understands what I'm going through better than you do because you're living with me. I said, but now you need to apply it. And applying it means filtering what I say through the lens of, okay, is she reacting this way because her emotions are
Mhm.
they're so misgoverned now? I said, "That would help.
Yeah.
That would help. Like, don't judge me for that, but instead process it through, okay, that is something that the brain injury called."
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. What were some of the lessons that you've learned that kind of made the biggest difference for you?
I would say the biggest thing for me was recognizing that at a certain point, I could either continue to chase treatment or decide to just make this. I mean, this was always going to be part of my life, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of people that I've talked to are like, I had to give up everything. I lie in a dark room all day.
Mm.
Did I continue to chase treatment or, which I stopped doing that. I said, you know what? I'm going to make a life with this. And one of my lessons for me was figuring out how to forgive myself
Mhm.
for not being who I was before. That was incredibly difficult, right? I mean, we're all high achievers, high achieving women, so we've had to overcome a lot, and to suddenly be like, to be needy, to not be able to be fully self reliant, and to be okay with that. So a lesson for me was that I had to learn to do that, but it took several years of working through this. And my
Yeah.
second year, year one of it was just try to keep doing what you're doing, just one foot in front of the other, keep the job, do all that stuff. Year two was just dark. Year two was I'm out of treatment. I don't know who I am. I keep comparing myself to who I was before, and that's trap. But I don't know how to get out of this.
Mhm.
I was in therapy at the time, which I had been in prior, and that wasn't helping. And I needed to
Mhm.
figure out something that would help. And for me, the thing that helped was writing. And
Mhm.
even more than writing, it was this idea of world building. Let me build the world that
Mhm.
we need. And then as more people got involved in it, and I could see that it was that that gave me juice again.
Mhm.
That gave me excitement again because in that second year, it felt like all my emotions were flattened too, and I couldn't feel anything, and then, of course, it changed, and then I could feel too much of everything, right? And it's just
Yeah.
but it was just like I needed to do something to figure out a way to get out of this hole that I was in.
Yeah. Yeah. So after developing Best Guessistan,
Yeah.
what would you
Well
like
pronounced,
to
by the way.
Thank
That
you.
was well
I tried. Had to stop and think about that. What would you like to see in a perfect world? What would you like to see transform in the real life that can help people?
I think well, I do think the language should change because I think this the whole mild moderate is a
Yeah.
problem and
Yeah.
creates sort of downstream problems from that. I think people not everyone has access to like, I had access to Rusk Rehab, right? I was able to get myself through contacts because even though I had access and all that, I couldn't get myself to the NYU Concussion Center, and then once
Mm.
I did, it gave me access to Rusk. I talked to lots of people who live in what they call, like, specialist deserts
Mhm.
who don't have access. So, I would love to see access to rehab for more people, better testing, better screening, and I would like the biotechs and the pharma companies to be investing in this in a much more serious way because
Mhm.
you can make the financial case to the pharma companies. Your 30 to 50% of that number
Yeah.
is a very, very significant number, and it's big enough for pharma to really wanna pay attention. So, I would like that. I would also it was interesting, I was looking at some, associations of, for our injuries and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I look at these websites and I was like, "These were not designed for people who have brain injuries." I am looking at white backgrounds. I mean, I live in dark mode, as I know a lot of people with brain
Yeah.
injuries do, but everything's on, like, gleaming white backgrounds, tons of text. Reading is incredibly difficult. I have to do everything through audio, and things just aren't designed for people like us. And again, the numbers of us are big enough that it would make sense to do some, like, more adaptive design. So I think there's a lot that can be done because I'll throw in one more thing. And I'm sure you've come across. We all know what the old guidance was. If you had a brain injury, it was no screens, like total cognitive rest, and, and then they did a ton of research. And I used to work in clinical trials and the technology of clinical trials.
Mhm.
And I don't know if it was like 10 or 15 years ago, they did a lot of serious studies. And different arms of the trial looked at different things, and they actually found that people who did not cut themselves off and who did continue to engage did better. And you would think that that research would filter down to all of neurology and even more to primary care, but it didn't. And I speak to people who have seen neurologists who have told them to do exactly that:
Yeah.
lie in a dark room, all cognitive rest. And it's really surprising to me that even though the data exists, people are still practicing in the way they did before that, and that's incredibly frustrating. Like,
Yeah.
how do we change that?
Yeah. I'm on kind of a rampage for that one. I'm trying to figure out where I need to go to require some updated education for healthcare providers because all the textbooks did tell us things
Yep, 10 to
from
14 days.
yeah, and everybody gets better within a month,
Yep,
and you don't have to worry about it beyond that, and just rest. And nobody has updated the education, even though the research is updated. It's the education has not been updated. And as healthcare providers, we have the option of choosing what our education credits are every year. We have
mhm,
to do a certain number of education credits to keep up our license, but we get
right,
to choose what that is. In most primary care, they're looking for the newest, latest, greatest updates in diabetes and blood pressure and XYZ. They're not looking at what's the newest in concussion because
right.
they don't realize that there's new things to know.
Right. But I think you just landed on it. So the problem is the education. So the problem
Yeah.
is the data from the research that says
Yeah.
there's a better way of doing things. If it doesn't seep into the education, nothing's going to change. Unless you can get, I mean, I was able to get to a concussion neurologist. That's the other thing I had. I had a neurologist before this because I have a
Yeah.
long history of migraine, which I know is one of the things that serves as a predictor of whether or not you're going to have this long-term post-concussive. But he was a headache specialist.
Yeah.
And I went to him right away. He was the one who said, get yourself to an ER, get a CT scan, right? Rule out a bleed, rule out a fracture. And I saw him for a while. And then he actually said to me, "You shouldn't be seeing me for this anymore." He was like, "You really need to see someone who specializes in concussion." And
Mhm.
again, because I was in New York City, it was a little bit easier. Most people don't have access to that.
Yeah.
It's hard enough to find a neurologist, let alone a concussion neurologist. And mine's a neuro-ophthalmologist, which is perfect because
Yeah.
I've had so many visual impacts, but that's not available to most people. So how do we bring treatment and rehab and all of that stuff closer to the people who have this? That's what I would love to see.
Yeah. Yeah. That. Yeah. That's my whole
That's a
next
small ask,
train.
right?
No, I
That's like a
think
heavy
if all
lift.
of us can band together, maybe we could make
Well,
something
that's it. Well,
different out of this. So,
come to
yeah,
Beskistan, and we,
yeah,
we have committees, and
yeah.
we'll
I'll come join a
work on it
committee.
together
Yeah, I'll
because
come join a
everyone there
committee.
gets.
Sounds good. Yeah.
You can only get there by boat, but it's got a really lovely transportation system.
As long as I can take something for motion sickness, I'm good.
Oh, yeah, yeah, no, you will not have any problems with that.
All right. So, Wendy, what other projects do you have going on that you want to talk about?
So I have a podcast where we talk about rupture,
Yeah.
but this isn't the project, but this is more of a model that I've developed that and everything I figure everything out as I go along. I sort of workshop everything publicly.
Mhm.
Like I don't sit in a room for 2 years and do strategy of like, how am I gonna build best guest system? I can figure it out in real time. And I kind of developed this model because I do think about systems a lot. And I think that's
Mhm.
because I was part of systems for so long. And then when I had the distance, it gave me perspective. And I could look at these systems and say, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute, what is going on here? So I developed this model that I've been using. So it's like 5 pieces and it's super easy to understand. First part is systems are designed for the people who administer them, not the people who need them. Rupture reveals the system's failures, right? Because you don't know that the system is a failure until you need it. You go to the system and you say, I need these things. The system is failing, so they can't provide it to you. So they actually go back to you and say, well, you actually have to solve it. And in Beskistan, we refer to that as load transfer. And then the individual, at their moment of maximum vulnerability, has to figure out how to get the support they need, whether it's insurance coverage, keeping their job, whatever it is. And then when when the individual succeeds against all odds, the system sits back and goes, see, the system works and nothing changes.
Mhm.
And I think it's really useful to think about a lot of this through a systems point of view. And I think for me, what triggered that was the disability system when I applied for
Mhm.
disability, which my neurologist had been encouraging me to do for a long time. And everyone who's been through it knows, like, it's brutal and you're going to get denied. And for a long time, I thought, aha, this is a broken system. This is a broken system. But then I started thinking about it a different way. And if you think about it this way, the system works. If you think the role of the disability system is to provide support for you when you can no longer work because you're disabled, you're wrong. I was wrong. I don't think that's what the system is about. I think the system has been designed to root out what the system thinks of as fraud.
Yeah.
And they want to prevent people from taking advantage. And what they've done is they've made the hurdles so high that people get it on the 3rd time, the 8th time after they've hired lawyers. But if the system is designed for that outcome, then the system's working fine. But our systems, and this has to do, this is healthcare systems, government systems, business systems are designed for people who start fine and stay fine. They are really not designed for what happens when, for whatever reason, you're no longer fine. And that's really at the heart of the work I'm interested in is how do we build systems that are humane and that are adaptive and that don't punish people for not being fine? Because the truth is, even though we're talking about this from a brain injury point of view, all kinds of things happen to people in their lives that affect
Mhm.
their ability to keep doing what they were doing. Divorce, grief, diagnosis, burnout. I mean, I have a list of like 30 of these things.
Mhm.
So odds are people in an organization are going to go through these things, but the systems that the organizations run on don't know how to adapt. And they would rather basically push the responsibility to you than to try to adapt because what systems are about is their own preservation. So that's a
Yeah.
big part of the project.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so true when you say it like that, that it's exactly the way those systems are meant to work.
Mhm.
They really are not after decades in healthcare watching patients try to apply for disability for various reasons. It's it's not out to help the
Mm-mm.
patient. It's clearly not, because if it did, the people that I would see on a daily basis that clearly have disabilities would get the help that they need,
Right, but they don't.
and they're not. No.
They don't. Well, and I
Mm.
think the other thing that goes sort of hand in hand with this is the idea of disclosure. I actually created a ministry of disclosure a few weeks
Mm.
ago because this turned out to be a bigger problem than I thought. So my first way time I encountered this was I spent a very dark few months applying for jobs on LinkedIn because I needed a job. It was a very dark few months. And I kept hitting this question, are you disabled? And I had no idea how to answer it because it was obviously a trap, right? It's obviously a trap. If you
Mhm.
say yes, would you make it past the first screen? And if you say no, and then you need accommodations, are you going to get them? Because they're like, you didn't need any of this stuff. And I didn't really think about it a lot at the time, only because the brain injury was so new and there was so much else to deal with. And then when I started this project and started talking to more people, I asked this question and well, what would happen was I would get a message from somebody saying, "You and I haven't been in touch in a really long time. We worked together 8,000 years ago, but I would love to talk to you because I have a brain injury and I don't have anybody to talk to about it," right? Or people would introduce me to people. And I would have these conversations and listen to these people tell these stories, and it was super insightful. And then I would say, like, "Would you be interested in, possibly being a guest on my podcast?" And most of the answers I got were no.
Huh?
And they were like, but they all went this way. It was always like, "I'd love to, but I think it's a great idea, but," and what followed the but was always, "I don't want my employer to know. I don't want my peers to know. I'm looking for a new job." And then I put the question on Reddit because I really wanted a bigger end than the 12 people I had talked to. So
Yeah.
I put the question in front of 18,000 people, and I was amazed at what I got back. This is a huge issue. I mean, if you tell people at work, they will think of you as lesser.
Yeah.
Right? They'll be like, let's not give her that project because, she's still dealing with stuff. And automatically you are taken off the track, right? And now you're in this disabled group
Yes.
who will never be seen as equal to the person you were before and
Yeah.
everybody else. And it's a huge issue.
Yeah.
So I think another thing that we can do that people like you, all of us can do is talk about this
Mhm.
and, and not sugarcoat it in any way, but this is a thing that is happening to millions of people all over
Yeah.
the world all the time. This is not an incredibly rare thing that you'll never come across. This is common,
Yeah.
but we don't treat it like it's common.
No.
So,
No. Yeah. Kind of backtracking for a moment, talking about your whole system thought again
yeah,
too. It
yeah.
made me also think of something that came up at that World Health Assembly event that I was at. And one of the ministries of health talked about how the fact that, again, those ministries,
I love the mysteries.
that everybody needs to work together because we were talking about TBI as a health issue, but it's not just a health issue. It's a financial issue. It's an economic issue. It's a structural infrastructure, everything,
Yeah,
transportation. It affects so many different systems. It's not just health. Just
right.
like the brain does not touch just the brain, it touches the
Right.
whole body. So it all needs to be interconnected. It's a
It
spider
it
web.
it needs to be interconnected, but our
Yeah.
systems are not interconnected. They're
No.
just the way they exist today, but when I first went on Reddit, again, because I was looking just am I crazy? I would read these stories about people who had a brain injury, and over time, they lost their jobs, right?
Yeah.
And then their friends peeled away because it
Yeah.
does become this is challenging socially, right? Like, when you have rotator cuff surgery, right, which we both
Yeah.
had,
Yeah.
people know what to ask you, right? And you're on the road to recovery. But
Yep.
after, like, a year or a year and a half of, when I was going through a lot of treatment, I had a lot to talk about,
Yeah.
right? People would ask me what's going on. I was like, "Oh, I'm trying this and I'm trying that." When I reached the point of, "This isn't gonna work," and people say to me to this day, like, they're like, "Oh, how's your head?" I'm like, Don't ask me, it doesn't change." And that's really hard for people. That
Mhm.
it's really, really challenging in a society that does value, like, quick recoveries and do everything on schedule and a ton of, frankly, toxic positivity. Like, "You
Yeah.
can do this." It
Yeah.
just doesn't work that way. But I would read these stories and people would, lose their friends. Some of them would lose their families. Some of them lost people were homeless. And to your point, it may start as a healthcare issue, but it splays into every aspect of your
Mhm.
life. And that is something I think people do not really understand about this particular kind of injury.
Yeah. Yeah. It affects so many things, and as we've already talked about, it doesn't people don't realize how many things it does
No.
affect and what all it goes on because it is invisible. People don't see it. I do have a shirt that says, "I have a TBI. What's your excuse?"
Oh, I love
So I
that.
wear that. I'll wear that in public every once in a while. And I have another one that says, "TBI or traumatic brain injury. 1 star. Would not recommend."
I love
So
that.
I've tried being funny and sparking conversation, and it's kind of interesting when people do ask me about my shirt or they say, "Oh, I love your shirt." I'm like, "Well, thanks, because this has been the experience that I've gone through." And it's kind of bringing light to something that people don't often talk about. There is that stigma. You don't want to talk
There is,
about it. You
yeah.
don't want to be that person that has the brain injury. But I still try to use it as an excuse. I'm like, "I've
Yeah,
got a brain injury. That's why I forget things." And then my children remind me, "Mom, you've improved too much. You can't use that anymore." I'm like, "Yes, I still can.
you
Thank
still
you very
can.
much."
You still can. You get to keep that is one
Yeah.
of the few perks of this is you get to hold on to that.
Right? Yeah,
But
that's my badge of honor on that one, so
yeah, no, it is. But, like, you're doing it, like, on a one-to-one basis, like, you're wearing a T-shirt. The question is, like, I
yeah,
mean, so I'm a marketer, right? So I look at this from a marketing point of view, and we have what I would call top of the funnel problem. So the very top of the marketing funnel is you're just trying to make people aware. Before you
yeah,
get them interested and considering and doing all those things so you get to the point of a transaction, the very top of the funnel is just these masses of humans who don't know about it. So how do we create awareness beyond just, I mean, I think we should all wear t-shirts all the time. I mean, that would be a way of doing it, but there's also I don't see any organizations doing this at scale. Stroke did a really good job. The people who were
Yeah.
behind the stroke campaign did a fantastic job in raising awareness of what early stroke signs look like, because if you got something really right away, you could reverse or, or
Yeah.
avoid the knock-on effects. But we need that for TBI. We need ad campaigns that talk about, like, the symptoms are different, but this is, I made this joke with someone the other day. Like, we walk among you. We're not like a separate class of people. There are tons of us,
Yeah.
and we're all trying to figure this out, but everybody around us has no idea what we're talking about.
Right. Yeah. So how do
Where
we make that language just everyday language?
I think the more of us who are talking about it and the more of us who are talking about it publicly, the better. Yeah, I've basically retired, like I was sort of forced to retire. So I don't have to worry about an employer reading something that I've
Yeah.
written or anything like that. So I'm writing and I'm publishing and I'm trying to reach as many people as I can. You're doing it through the podcast. There are a lot of us trying to do it. I think maybe if we could do more things together, if, like, we could form, like, we're patients, but we're like, you have the advantage of being a clinician. I don't have that advantage, but I have the ability to understand systems because of my background. But, like, if we bring these different perspectives and ways of looking at it, and helping people understand that this isn't just a health issue. This is
Yeah.
it's an equity issue. I mean, it does affect everything. I think we need to be out and proud talking about this.
Yeah.
Any
Yeah.
to anyone who will listen, and even to people who won't listen. Like, just listen for us. We need an elevator speech. Like, here are the 3 things you need to know. But I do think we have to talk about it, and I think the providers need to talk about it.
Yeah.
I would love it if my neurologist, went on a tour, and, like, we were gonna go on a book tour together, and we still may when the Best Guess to Stand book comes out. But, like, how do we get attention? How do we get people educated about the research, right? About the clinical trials and the data? We have a huge country. Media is expensive in a lot of places. Like, so we don't have the advantage of, like, a big brand who can just say, "I'm gonna spend $100 million on this." So
Yeah.
we have to be scrappy. So
Yeah.
who do we partner with, right? What
Yeah.
what pharma companies are working with this who might actually have a budget to talk about this?
Yeah.
I mean, someone came up with the funding for the stroke awareness.
Yep.
I think that's a model that we should look at. And I'm sure pharma is behind it because pharma is always behind it.
There usually is. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
but it made a huge difference. I mean, my husband he had 1 stroke and 1 TIA, but I recognized him immediately. And maybe it was because I knew it before, but I definitely remembered it from the campaign.
Yeah.
So why don't we use the communication tools that exist to educate people about this, to create
Yeah.
awareness about this? Because we know how to do it. We just have to apply it to this problem,
Right. Right.
which is
Yeah.
hard.
Funny thing about that connection between brain injury and stroke also. Years ago, I gave a presentation about the risk of brain injury and stroke. People that have a stroke are at increased risk of having a brain injury because they might fall. People that have a brain injury are at increased risk of potentially having a stroke because of changes in the chemistry in the brain. So it'd be interesting. I haven't looked at the connection between the
That's
numbers, but
interesting.
seeing how many people have stroke every year versus how many people have a TBI, and kind of seeing where we could go with marketing from that standpoint,
Yeah,
because I think the numbers would be
the
pretty
numbers are big.
comparable. Yeah.
The numbers are
Yeah.
they're big enough for people to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Like, unlike my autoimmune disease, which is like 1 to 3 people per million.
Yeah.
You'll
Yeah.
never get you just won't have the order of magnitude for anybody to pay
Right.
attention, but we have the numbers.
Yeah.
But I think there are a lot of us doing this work individually, and I think the more of it we can do together, the more powerful we are. And, there are people like me who understand marketing. There are people who have this who understand media. We exist. We just have to find a way to come together. And
Yeah.
I hope that my project helps do that. I hope what you're doing does that. But I think we have to make the affirmative case for coming together and campaigns work, marketing campaigns work, or else
Yep.
everybody would take the budget away. And
Yeah.
they don't, because advertising works.
Yeah.
And I think we need to use those tools here.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Best Guess to Stand needs committees, and I think we all need to join them. So, yeah.
Well, here's the thing. When anyone is a guest on my podcast, they always get a ministry. And I always offer them a ministry in advance, so
Yeah.
they're not sort of like sidelined by it. I did one with a friend, and we created the ministry of "Don't fix me, just listen."
Yeah.
Right? Because people want to, as soon as you tell them you have a whatever, they will try to fix you in the next sentence. And
Yeah.
just listen, just listen.
Yeah.
And yeah, we know that. And so I give people the ministry assignment, and then I'm like, you will get the paperwork. It will be confounding. It will be confusing. That's totally fine. Because one of the things on Best Guess to Stand is there are no wrong answers.
Yeah.
There are none. They're just
Yeah.
different ways of solving problems.
Yeah.
But yeah, we need committees and people who are committed to a specific aspect of this work, not just but like creating awareness around the long-term impacts for people who don't recover in the 2 to 4 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah.
It will benefit a lot of people.
There's a lot of us.
There
There's a
are a
lot
lot
of
of
us.
us.
Yeah.
There are. We're everywhere.
So where can people find you, Wendy, if they wanted to catch up on all of the stuff you're doing?
So I publish on Substack.
Mhm.
I also publish on Medium, but Substack's probably the best way. You can find me, we're at, best guess substack.bestguessistan.com. Again, I have a brain injury, so I may get this backwards. There's a YouTube channel, just have to look up Rupture: The World of Bestguessistan. We're also on Apple and Spotify, wherever you can find podcasts, and those are really the main places to find the work, and some really interesting conversations
Okay.
that
I
I've
will
been having along the way.
Awesome. I will put all of those links in the show notes so people can find that also. Any last words of advice you'd like to share as we wrap up today?
This one of the things that the systems point of view does is it enables people to let go of the guilt and the shame around this. Because that's the other thing is people feel, and when you hear this from the outside, you're like, why would anyone feel guilty? But people do feel guilty. You feel guilty
Yeah.
that you can't do the things that you were always able to do. Or people feel shame about that. And a big part of my project is it isn't your fault. It isn't the fault of the individual going through something. It is the fault of the system that is not set up to help them. And giving people a way to let go of the guilt and the shame, I think is really, really important. Because I mean, I've done it to myself. Everyone I've spoken to talks about, especially the women,
Mhm.
talk about not, feeling terrible because they can't do all of the things. And we need to forgive ourselves because we are not. So
Yeah.
that's my closing thought.
Yep. I love it. Let's end on those words because those are great words to end on. Thank you so much for being here today, Wendy.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Brain Wellness, the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to subscribe, like, leave a comment, and share it so that others can benefit. Please also consider supporting the show by buying me a coffee. The link is in the show notes. You can also go to www.brainwellnesssolutions.com to catch the latest info and get links on all of the social medias there. See you next time.